The Short Game is listener-supported on Patreon. If you'd like to support the show and join us on our Discord, head to theshortgame.net or patreon.com/theshortgame.
Welcome back to The Short Game. This is a show about short video games, games that respect your time. I'm Raygan Kelly, and I am once again joined by all of my fine co-hosts.
Nate Heininger.
Laura Nash.
And Shane Kelly.
And this week we are talking about ElecHead, a puzzle platformer, an indie, very short puzzle platformer by Nama Takahashi, and with a soundtrack by Tsuyomi. Apologies in advance if I mispronounced anything. And it's available on Steam and itch. At this point, no console releases yet, although we can dream, for $9.99.
What a delightful game. I was going to say that this was a real palate cleanser, as if I've been playing bad games, which is not the case. You know, the game we did last week was one of the most delightful games that I think we've ever done. But there was something just so nice about this game. I love a platformer. And this one was exactly the right size and exactly the right amount of time and effort for a game like this. I really enjoyed this game.
Man, all I want from a puzzle platformer is to feel smart, and this one delivered.
Yes.
There's great level design. It was just challenging enough that I didn't think it was for babies, but I wasn't like, oh no, it wasn't Baba's You. This is going to take me 30 minutes to solve. I knew everything was in the room. Like, mwah, just lovely. The premise is you are this little robot thingy with an electric head. And you, when you touch parts of the environment, they turn on. And that is sometimes a great thing when you need to move part of the environment around and you need to like move a platform over. Or it can be a bad thing when fireballs turn on. And that's the whole game.
Yeah. What do you... there's a loose frame story going on here. I think the world's electricity has shut down, and now you as ElecHead are going around and re-electrifying the world, or the opposite. I'm not really sure, but there's a little cutscene at the beginning, and then
unclear since the game has no words in it whatsoever, even to the exclusion of even to the point where the menu is completely wordless. Even things like full screen or windowed mode are represented by icons with no text whatsoever. The only words in the game are the title screen says ElecHead in big text. So this is like one of the most incredibly condensed, really tight little games I've played in ages. I spent exactly 3 hours with this, and I wouldn't exactly say I rushed. It really feels great to have one of these games that is like a really good, solid central core idea that it explores really fully, but never over-explores. It never does the same puzzle idea twice, and it's in, it's out, it's done in a really great short game friendly kind of way. I really love it. Felt like opening a small container of a delicious snack, and when you're done with the container, it was the exact right amount of whatever that snack was.
I've literally never had that experience, but it sounds great.
That's what I was gonna say. I was like, I don't know. I do think that this was perfectly sized, but I also will say I could have played more. But, I just because I enjoyed it so much. But also, I love something not overstaying its welcome. It's great.
So I want to talk just a little bit about the game's development story, which I don't know a ton about because it is a indie game from Japan. Obviously, that means that, there's a little bit of a language barrier. Might have been why he chose to do the game completely wordlessly. Save some money.
Yeah. I think if you look at the whole history of Japanese game development, it's been a very successful strategy to make games that have no words or as few words as possible, and it really saves on the localization.
Can you name a game or two where they've successfully pulled that off?
Well, I think if you look at games like platformers, I'm thinking about
the entire history of games on the NES, for example.
Yeah, which is what this visually resembles. It really looks like It's even more simplified than the NES. It has very limited set of sprites and an extremely limited color palette.
No
So I would even compare it to a Game Boy game in terms of the aesthetics. Although, of course, it's meant to be played on a bigger screen. But yeah, 2 colors, really 3 colors, I guess, like gray
with the background. Yeah,
3 colors in a background.
So in the one piece of developer interview that I could find about this game, Nama Takahashi talked about being inspired by Moppin, the developer of Downwell. And you can kind of see that here. It's using a different color scheme, but it has a pretty reminiscent art style. The sort of like not quite 1-bit, but like maybe 2-bit kind of very sharp pixel art. And I think that was also kind of interesting that like this is part of a corner of Japanese development or game development that is still pretty small. You don't see a lot of these kinds of indie games coming from Japan. These like actual solo indie dev.
I'd really like to know why that is.
The indie scene in Japan has. I have some thoughts, although like a lot of this is speculation. Japan is a little behind the US in terms of the indie boom. The indie boom hit the US like, I don't know, early 2000s, right? Like, I don't know, 2006, if I had to pull a number out of my ass. I don't know where that comes from. I just guessed. Anyway, it wasn't until really closer to like 2013 that the indie game boom really happened in Japan. And part of that is because they had a different culture around the way that they do small independent game dev. They had this concept over there and still do of doujin games, which is like grows out of doujin comics, which is this idea that there would be like groups of amateurs, mostly fans of big works, who would get together in kind of clubs that usually get called circles, like doujin circles, and would create fan comics or fan games, in most cases kind of based on big properties. And then they wouldn't distribute these things online typically, partly because this was, started quite a while back, but mostly it was the culture of it was around going to things like ElecHead and these other like big comic conventions there. And they would sell their wares in person, usually in like small quantities. And it's this whole thing. And so there was this whole culture of doujin games. And if you look at some things that we've covered, things like Cave Story, that kind of came out of the doujin game like world. But that game kind of feels like a early antecedent to the entire modern Japanese indie dev scene. Anyway, you don't really see this kind of game, this kind of development shaking out until much later. And I think it's because it's, people are, because Japanese indie devs are either used to working in a more corporate setting, or if they are working on something, it took a while for them to kind of move away from that sort of, fan game distributed on discs in plastic bags at a comic convention thing over to like, they didn't have, there's a big event over there. There's a big event over there called, what's it called? Bit Summit. That's kind of like their big indie dev event. And it actually kind of started when a bunch of Western companies started coming to Japan to recruit Japanese indie devs. And it didn't start until like 2013. And so the indie scene is just different over there. And like this guy, when he was doing the interview that I saw, mostly talked about how it didn't even occur to him that he could do game development solo until he went to, I think it was a Bit Summit event, and saw Downwell, saw Moppin presenting his game Downwell, and thought, hey,
man, Downwell was so
good.
And
yeah,
so
I was gonna.
I can see the comparison too,
really
because
was,
there's one like in Downwell. One of the things that you would unlock as beginning high scores is the different color palettes. Yep. And I can see this guy's kind of tribute to that in giving you color palettes in the menu, which again,
you can collect
totally
as well. If you find them as secrets, you can find new ones.
Okay,
Yeah.
I thought I didn't realize that they were as secrets. But yeah, I don't think that concept works quite as well in a platformer. Like having different color palettes would have been such a good way to break the different areas up. But that's a really interesting kind of lineage for this?
We, for quite a while, we've kept a running track of games we've talked about on this show, and for a while, Donwell was our most talked about, not covered game. Mm-hmm. So it's good.
We mentioned it so many times.
It's great to bring it back. We always look for more opportunities to talk about Donwell. And
it was that, and You Must Build a Boat.
Yeah, You Must Build a Boat and Donwell are two most favorite non-covered games. But yeah, I liked how they handled the palettes in this game, and I found a couple of them, and actually ended up using one of them as my primary palette in the game. And I didn't make the Donwell connection, so it makes a ton of sense.
Well, something I appreciate with this and Donwell is the focus. I mean, there's not a heads-up display to worry about. You're not counting lives in the corner. You're just focusing on the level. And I think at Donwell, it's because you're literally just falling so fast that you can barely track anything. There is actual score and stuff, but you just
doesn't matter.
It.
Yeah.
Here, it's completely cleared out. I mean, I don't want to call it minimalist because I think the puzzles are actually pretty that to me connotates we've played some minimalist puzzle platformers. This is not a minimalist puzzle platformer. No. But it does just clear out all the extraneous bits. When you get to a screen, the answer's there. Mm-hmm. And that is not true on most, or it's right off.
I was going to say that's a little bit.
There are a couple of times where it defies that for specific puzzle reasons, but
but you have everything you need when you get in a room. It's not a Metroidvania.
Yeah. There's almost nothing wasted. Everything is very intentionally placed. There's a really cool. We already talked about how you conduct electricity, and when most of the world is made out of metal, so when you're standing on it, that whole the entire thing that you're standing on or you're touching with your feet or with your head, or the nice little animation when you go up against a wall. Did you all notice ElecHead puts their hand up on the wall? There's a ton of really nice little animations in this game, and whatever you're touching gets electrified. And because almost everything is assumably it's metal, it changes the color to match ElecHead. So in the basic palette, ElecHead is a nice yellow. And so you're standing on something metal and the entire thing turns yellow. And then it's continuous that the electricity will transmit through everything that is metal that you are currently touching. And a lot of the game is built around the fact that these platforms are kind of suspended, and sometimes they touch and sometimes they don't. And that's a lot of the puzzle, is trying to figure out not only just how to get ElecHead from one spot to another, but sometimes also how do you transmit electricity across a gap or something like that. And it's really interesting. And, we're talking about the design here that it's very, very smart the way that they broke out these platforms and these metal pipes that you stand on, and how they disconnect from each other at the exact right place to make a puzzle more challenging or to kind of guide you even. This game does a really good job at teaching you with zero evidence that you're even being taught. The way it builds on its puzzles, and the way it uses the environment to teach you how some things, how electricity transmits across things sometimes, I think is so clever and so simple.
So we haven't talked about the head throwing mechanic yet, which I think is my favorite thing about this game, because when I discovered it, you don't actually learn it until maybe easily after the stuff that you could seriously consider a tutorial. It's probably 10
minutes out of a 3 hour. It's only
not a long time into the game.
Yeah. I have to say the hilarious thing at the very beginning here, in this part that you kind of consider a tutorial, the game communicates everything it needs to tell you through signs that show up in the level, right? The very first sign that I found was a sign that just lit up when you stood next to it, and it was a turd, and the game went da da da. I want to come back to that because I don't know why the turds were there. I kept finding turd signs. They just represented any dead end. What it was.
I think it was just a dead end, but it took me a while to figure that out. Yeah. I kept being what? I was pressing the down arrow, standing on it, and I would just
I was trying to interact with that stupid turd for so long.
Yeah. I turn on the electric billboard, and it just flashes a turd noid.
So the head throwing mechanic was really delightful when it first got introduced. Like, I did it the first time and I just busted out laughing because the animation is great and it's just a funny little mechanic. But it's super core to the way the game works. ElecHead is this little robot with a head that's sort of shaped like a battery, and his head is the electric part, right? And you can eventually throw your head. It has very simple physics for how the head throw works. You always know exactly how far it's going to go and where it's going to land, and it always flies in exactly a straight line. There's no arc, so it makes the puzzle aspect of it very simple and easy to understand what you're going to do. It's low on execution, difficulty, and high on just like understanding the requirements. Anyway, you throw your head, and it shoots out and then drops to the floor. And your head continues to be electrified, but your body then has a 10-second countdown timer where it can run around. And as long as you can get reunited with your head before the end of that 10-second countdown timer, then you're good. But if you don't, both head and body explode and you reset to the last checkpoint.
Yeah. The head will also, it sticks very briefly to whatever you throw it to. So you hit it with a wall, and it's just like clink, and then falls. Yep. Or if you hit the ceiling, it sticks for a moment and then falls. And that's a lot of this game, is this like throw your head, it's like go and do something in 10 seconds and beat it. Reminded me of Master Blaster almost, where like
really funny alternate universe version of physics is what this head has.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Just like,
yeah, it's great. But
it's super simple, perfect puzzle physics.
And
they're really good.
Your body is about half the size of, or your body is the same size as your head, if that makes sense. So when you throw your head, the body you're running around with is much smaller, and there's a bunch of puzzles that are like, oh, only my body can get through this. So I know I'm gonna have to throw my head somewhere, maybe electrify something, mad dash through whatever this tiny platforming thing is, and then recover my head maybe on the other side. Maybe it's moved around on a platform, who knows? But if you don't get it, you get a delightful little explosion scene. Like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, just a little
just a great little
animation. That's the word I was looking for. The sprite, everything just poof. It's actually kind of a satisfying explosion. And you can just press R if you mess something up. And like, at least for me, what would happen is I would like throw my head, and then I realized, I screwed it up, and I didn't want to wait the like 10-second countdown, and I just hit R, or I accidentally throw my head into an inaccessible place, and it's like, and just hit the R button. It's a very satisfying, little explosion, and then you boot right back immediately to the last checkpoint.
And one extra little song of praise for the throwing mechanic: it has a sight, so you know exactly how far you're going to throw that sucker. You look up, you can like see how high you'll throw it. It takes the, is this a puzzle thing I should try? Like, is it? You don't have to worry about like remembering how far things throw this game. It will just tell you, so you know if it's a viable thing to try or not. Thank you, developer, for putting that in the game.
So a lot of the stuff that we're talking about, you can throw your head, which is a big action thing. As Laura said, it has a little sight, and you see where you're going to throw it. And at times, there is this little bit of like a mad dash about what you have to do with your body once you've thrown your head. And so you might be listening and thinking like, oh, this sounds more like an action platformer because there's all these little cues we're talking about. But really, it's almost never in this game about being able to execute a challenging puzzle executing a challenging situation like a Celeste or any of the other action platformers that we've done.
It's not platforming mechanics that are the challenge. It's the puzzle.
Yeah, like with a high execution game, you know what you're supposed to do almost immediately, but it's hard to do it. This game, as soon as you figure out what you can do or what to do, you're probably going to execute it on the first try. Like, I think this game will probably have some really good speed runs in it, because I really think that you could ace this game without dying, with very little effort after you've played it a couple times. And I bet some people are going to get really, really good at it, because it's really all about solving the puzzle, figuring out what combination of your very limited move set and how it interacts with a very simple world. And once you've got that, it's done. And that's what Laura said right out at the beginning of this show, that like, it's challenging enough that when you beat it, you feel very smart, but it's never so challenging that like I had to step away, or, you know, it took me more than, you know, a few minutes. Raygan said he beat the game in 3 hours. I think like that's probably, and there's a lot of puzzles that this, like, it's 3 hours of constant gameplay and constant screen after screen after screen. So there's a lot of these puzzles, but no one of them is really difficult. It does have a difficulty curve. The puzzles get more complicated as the game goes along, but for the most part, you know, it's never so challenging that it's frustrating, but it's challenging enough that it's very satisfying. And there's just something so fun and tactile about throwing your head, executing this little, you know, little thing, this little puzzle, and then moving forward, or exploding like, you know, 9 or 10 times as you figure it out.
It's also super low stakes, which I appreciate in a puzzle game, because it encourages you to try things, because you can just throw your head, see where it lands, see if that solves the puzzle. You can try something else. There's not a huge barrier to experimentation because there's so many checkpoints. Yeah. So I think that's also key to my enjoyment of a puzzle game, is its gentle reset, that you can try something that might be true even if you aren't sure. Like, there are games where that is a huge no-no because the risk of dying is so great.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And those are the puzzle games I have a big problem with, because you can't experiment. You must know the answer before trying it.
We're definitely, I think, selling this game well by saying like, hey, this is this is a game where you're going to get to throw your head around and solve fabulous puzzles, and, you know, throw your head around and feel smart the whole time, and it's real short. If you want a game where you can throw your head around, but you don't like any of the rest of that stuff, and you're like, I really want a Metroidvania instead, I would say check out Headlander. Anybody remember that one?
No.
No, this was the old Adult Swim games. I was so reminded of that when I started this game.
Shane has had this stupid grin on his face the entire time he's been trying to set this. I'm like, where is this going? What joke is he working on?
No, I am serious. I liked Headlander. Headlander was it's like 10 years old at this point. But
it seems so much more recent than that. My God.
It's an old Adult Swim game where you were an astronaut whose head could come off, and like all the astronauts.
Not 10 years old, Shane. We're not dead yet.
All right.
But time doesn't have any meaning anymore. It's fine.
Indeed.
Yeah. But, you know, speaking of things this reminded me of, it was kind of felt like a cross between that and maybe like Chibi Robo, which is almost legitimately 10 years old. When was that one?
Oh, yeah, that was a GameCube game. He does look a lot like Chibi Robo. And Chibi Robo also played with electricity mechanics, so definitely has some influence there, or very likely. That was a super cute game. I never really played a whole Chibi Robo game. I've like dabbled a little bit in an emulator, but that's as much as I've really done Chibi Robo.
Yeah, that game really drew me in with the design. This one was really all about the mechanics. I think the design is good and very clear on this game. And like I said, by having no text at all, they make it very engaging on they make the game just so easy to get into without having to worry about anything. Like, it's okay, I can see icons, I can keep moving.
So I want to call out one last thing about the puzzle design on this game that I just think is like, I think one of the most unique things about it. And because this is a fairly unique thing about the puzzle design, especially towards the latter half of the game, you might potentially consider this spoilers. I'm not going to be talking about puzzle solutions for anything in particular, but if you want to be surprised and delighted and don't want to hear about the mechanical thing that this game does, one of the mechanical things that this game does that I think is pretty unique, maybe go ahead and skip ahead a little bit, probably not more than 30 seconds. This game does a lot with using parts of the level that you don't expect to be part of a puzzle as parts of the puzzle, specifically checkpoints and the like end of zone like teleporter or portal things. So the game has a bunch of checkpoints. Like every screen essentially has a checkpoint so that you can reset if you die or if you lose your head and end up exploding or whatever. And every time you walk over one of those checkpoints, it resets the position of everything in the room. And that's important because a lot of the puzzles, like, if you move something into an inaccessible position, like, for example, your head, but maybe one of the platforms or something, you need it to reset in order for you to try again because these puzzles are very tightly designed. But that reset becomes a puzzle mechanic in a bunch of really clever puzzles where, for example, the first time that I encountered this, that was like, again, the game like teaching you its mechanics in very clever environmental ways, was there's a long hallway that has 8 checkpoints in it. And you have to get from one end of the hallway to the other. And you've, done something, I forget what, to set something up, and you need to then traverse that hallway in order to get to the thing that you just set up. But of course, if you touch any of those checkpoints, it resets the puzzle and starts over. So, you're realizing, oh, okay, I have to set this up, and then I have to avoid the checkpoints after that. And it plays with that same kind of idea several times with things like the checkpoints and the portals that I thought that was like super clever.
Yeah.
One of the ways that this game really stood out in terms of puzzle design.
I also thought similarly, and again, similar spoiler caveat here, but there are elements of the world that you see around that you think are just background things to add a little bit of flavor to the world. I'm speaking here of most notably the like what appear to be little dead like robots or something. We have no idea what's going on in this world, but there are little shells of what look like little robots that are kind of all over the place. And you're like, oh, maybe previous ElecHeads had tried to do this or something like that, right? And they had failed.
Environmental storytelling.
Yes.
A skeleton on a toilet.
Wow.
An ElecHead on a pile of spikes.
Yes. What story are they trying to tell us?
It looks like in the past somebody stepped on a spike floor.
Yeah. I think that thing died on that spike. It would be great if every time you died, it just left behind a little shell and just piles up. But
the swapper.
Oh yeah, that is the swapper.
Behind dead bodies.
Oh my god, I love the swapper.
What have I done?
I remember the swapper exists.
What have I done?
I should play the swapper again.
I did what I had to do. Yeah, what a great game. Anyway, so these little metal shells, they seem to just be environmental storytelling until you realize they also are a part of the environment, and they are seemingly made of metal. Metal conducts electricity. And I guess I'll leave it at that. But I just like the way they teach you about that and the way that it incorporates that, I just thought was so cool and a great progression of a very simple game. So smart. I took a screenshot of the first time I learned that because I was like, oh my God, it's blowing my mind.
I took a screenshot of the one time, I think it must just be random, like 1 in 500 times when you throw your head and it lands back on your body upside down.
Wait. I don't think I saw
What?
this.
Yeah, I ran it out a couple times.
I don't think I saw this, or I didn't notice. Yeah.
Amazing.
I loved it.
Yeah.
I just, you throw out your head, it lands on the floor, and it's like, oh, it's upside down. What happened? Or the very subtle thing where if you play the same level a whole bunch of times and you keep dying, he gets angry eyes.
I did see that. There's a, I've said this game is not about execution. Other than some of the secrets, there's much like a strawberry from Celeste. We've already talked about the color palettes. There's also little like floating discs or remotes or something. Yeah.
Chips, whatever they are.
And they are, just a little technology, just a little floating technology. And they are optional, more challenging, puzzles, almost always hidden through some sort of secret wall. And then, you see it and you're like, well, do I want to do that or not? And some of those are actual like speed challenges, like platforming challenges. There's one that I spent too long on, but it was satisfying, where you activate a timer, and there's a brief amount of time to collect 30 of these little chips. Did any of you find that and do that?
No, I haven't found that.
Mm-mm.
I think there's a lot of little secrets that I missed because I was playing to complete the thing.
Well, there's 20 of these additional chips, but this one accounts for 3 of them, because depending on how many of these chips you can get in this short amount of time.
Oh yeah, that spot.
Yeah.
That was a really cool little.
Yeah.
You have to really be. I only was able to get 2 out of 3 of those, but the timing was cool. You had to really be good with the throws and throwing and picking up your head so that you and the head are both collecting chips at the same time.
It was a really cool mechanic, and that's where I was like, I love the brevity of this game, but some of these extra challenges, they do a good job of playing with like what you're capable of when you can throw your head and also control your body. And so like what Shane's talking about is, the only way to really beat it is that these chips are popping in the air, and you see where the next one's going to come out. And so what you might have to do is it's like a tiered platform. There's 3 levels. You can be on the main floor, the middle floor, the top floor. And so what you might have to do is throw your head to the left and jump to the right to get the chip in the air, so that the one that is...
Put your hands on your hips
yes.
and pull your knees in.
Do the time warp, baby. The falling head on the left side of the screen gets the new chip that has appeared because you got the chip on the right, and then a new chip has appeared in the middle, and you go get that while you go get your head, which you then throw across. So it's this like really challenging balance of throwing your head to get chips, using yourself to get chips, and then also there's the timer that you can only be apart from your head for a certain amount of time. So you have to kind of balance that, and it was actually hard, like actually hard platforming stuff that, of course, I enjoy, but I also like if this is an optional thing. If you are like this, if you're like, this sucks, rightfully so, I don't know why I like this masochist shit, but like, it's, you can step away if you don't like it, but I enjoyed it. And I thought it was cool that this was just tucked away. Find it. It's cool. If not, move on.
I mean, on the other side of the spectrum, I think the first time I was really excited about this game is when I was running around a room and didn't know how to beat it. And I just jumped up, hit the ceiling, and it moved a platform. And I was like, the ceiling's electric. This game thinks of everything.
Yeah, there's a lot of that, where there's nothing to do. And then you're like, have I electrified everything?
Yeah. It's a real like completionist, set everything. Just stick lightning through every single thing in the room, and eventually you'll solve the problem. I think it's really nice to opt into a, keyboard mashing, button mashing challenge, and then just be able to jump around kind of doing stupid stuff. And still, both of those are viable ways to play the game.
So briefly wrapping up, ElecHead, double thumbs up recommendation from me. This is a really great little one evening, game that you can pick up on, PC. And for the Mac users in the audience, Laura and Nate, I believe, both played on Macs via Parallels.
Correct.
So while there's no Mac port of this, it should be playable on most setups if you're willing to do a little bit of extra work. I would imagine also on, Linux or whatever you have.
They gotta get this. They gotta get this to Switch. It is
it'd be great.
It's a perfect Switch game. I think it'd be a huge hit.
We didn't talk about controls. I think Nate played on keyboard, but of course it also supports gamepad, and it's perfectly great on a gamepad as well. Controls were not remappable, which I found a little annoying at first when before the part where you realize that you can throw your head, I thought like, why is my jump button here and not here? But then once you unlock the head throwing, the controls made sense. So I didn't actually need to remap
It's
them.
funny how
the keyboard you jump with C, and I was like, this is inexplicable.
Yeah, and it's also funny how like even it's like a simplicity of controls. There's still ways to screw it up. There's 2 buttons, C for jump and X for throw your head. And like the amount of times I would be like, I'd be like, I need to throw my head, and I jump right into a into a lightning bolt, or vice versa. I need to jump and I just throw my head into a spike or something. Like, come on, there's 2 buttons. I've been playing Horizon Zero Dawn in between this, which is like 45 inputs per fight, and I can do that. But in this game, 2 buttons. Anyway.
Keyboard does let you remap though, so.
Oh, that's nice. I may have just missed it because the menus had no.
I went in the menu because I was like, why am I hitting C? Let's go to this menu.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So it's available on itch.io and Steam. It's $10 in both places. It's currently 10% off. So $8.99. I always recommend, hey, pick it up on itch.io if you don't have a strong platform preference, because more of your money goes directly to the developer, which is always a nice thing to do. Although I will also say that this game has a killer soundtrack from Tsuyomi, and I don't see an option to buy that independently of the game. And it doesn't have it available on itch.io that I can see. So if you want to buy that, you may need to buy it on Steam, if that matters to you. But I did check, and the soundtrack, which is great, is on Apple Music and probably also on places like Spotify. So there's that. Check it out there. And anything last things we want to say about ElecHead?
Get this game. It's great.
Yeah, check it out. I think this is a great short game in the sense that like this is really a single evening, and it was a really good single evening game. So check this thing out. Let's see.
We so frequently have to stretch our definition of short, and this it was almost smaller than I expected it to be.
Yeah, 3 hours, and probably less if you're better at it than me. So with that said, we've got some time for what's making us happy this week. So, Laura, what's making you happy this week?
So I have been watching a ton of movies, catching up on things released in the past year. And with it, I've gotten new songs. So I think the funny thing about my way I listen to music is I tend to grab onto 4 or 5 songs of whatever I've seen, like whatever TV show, whatever movie I've seen recently. And those end up going to the top of the playlist, and I listen to them over and over and over again. And today, I will confess, I listened to Everlasting Love by Love Affair 5 times because it's used in the movie Belfast in a very good scene with like 2 enormously attractive people dancing. I won't spoil what it's about, but it's just such a joyous moment in the movie. And I think it's not that it's weird to say like a movie about the troubles in Northern Ireland made you happy, but that scene in particular did, and that song did. The movie's pretty good, but I've seen better this year. Come at me, Belfast fans. Although if you want to see a movie with your family, this is like perfect because everyone's going to be happy about it. However, it did make me start thinking about other songs I've gotten overly attached to in the last month, and I wanted to give a shout out to, of all things, a version of Green Sleeves by Mason Williams that I listened to 7 times the week after I saw Licorice Pizza. He's the guy who wrote Classical Gas. And I was like, what's this song that's not Classical Gas that sounds very much like Classical Gas? Turns out it's a version of Green Sleeves by the guy who wrote Classical Gas. And one other music fixation that's made me happy is I finally saw Hadestown. I won lottery tickets. And I, as a result, was finally able to listen to the original concept album the musical is based on. And there's a beautiful version of a song called Wedding Song that's Anais Mitchell and Justin Vernon of Bon Iver. And it's just like, I picture the kind of people who get married in the woods playing this at their reception. It is just beautiful. It's very chill. And even if you don't like musicals, it's a very, very good folk song. So that's Everlasting Love, Wedding Song, and Green Sleeves. Possibly the worst playlist I've ever put together. The songs are completely different, but they've all made me really happy and reminded me of the best parts of some of the media I've watched this month.
Nice. Love a music recommendation.
Absolutely. We don't do music recommendations on this show often enough. And when we do, it's usually video game music.
Probably because we don't play the tracks, and it's weird to do music recommendations, so I tried to give the names a few times. But
thank you, Laura.
Yeah. Good luck looking them up.
Listeners, I apologize if I don't have links in the show notes. You're just going to have to search those for yourself.
They're bangers.
Nate. Good. But Nate, what's making you happy this week?
Yeah, well, I'll do a quick music shout out. I've got another thing I want to talk about, but you've inspired me, Laura. I've been really into this album that a buddy shared with me. The band is called Thumpasaurus. They have an album that came out in the last few months called Thumpaverse. It's one of the most like frenetic, silly, funky albums that I've heard in a long time, and I am hooked. They're like a weird combination of like Talking Heads, Devo, Aquabats. They are all over the place. I could name like 20 more bands that they remind me of. Their top song on streaming right now is a song called Struttin'. It's goofy as hell.
Oh man,
check it out. I'm hooked. It's awesome. And listen to the whole album. I've been listening to it nonstop for like a week straight.
Right. I just switched from Spotify over to Apple Music, and I've been in the process of settling in and listening to new music for the first time in a little while. And so
check it out.
Both of you for the Rex.
I can't recommend this. I haven't been as excited about an album as this one for a while now. So the other thing I was going to say I have been excited about that's been making me happy is I've actually talked about this before on the show, but have had a recent success with this. So I've talked about Yoga with Adrian. I think a lot of people know who this is, like the most popular yoga instructor on YouTube. She's great. And she does every January these 30-day challenges where she releases a new video every day. And they're always available, and Molly and I have like tried to do them before, do like 30 days straight, and inevitably something gets in the way. And who knows, maybe it was the COVID or maybe it was our furnace going out, but like we've been home for a month straight and we've had no barriers, and we managed to do on the day 30 days straight yoga following the guidance of Yoga with Adrian, and it was fantastic. I don't know if we'll ever pull this off again, but it's been great. I'm not good at this. I am like only comfortable like standing up or laying down flat, but like that's what is so good about this, the way she does the instruction. It's accessible for anyone and all types, and I really enjoyed it. So make me happy that managed to do it for 30 days straight.
You know, I know the last time that you talked about Yoga with Adrian, I was like, yeah, that sounds great. I need to do that. I really need to do some yoga for my, falling apart old guy body. And then I didn't do it. And so I'm saying this time the exact same thing, and likely we'll have the same result. But,
Raygan,
but we'll see.
The light in me recognizes the light in you. Okay, give it a shot. Give it a shot.
Thank you, Nate. That's beautiful, Nate. You guys both recommended lovely things. I'm going to recommend something else that made me extremely happy this week, and that is that I've talked about this on the show before as well, but friend of the show, Kirk Lindsay, updated his killer puzzle game, also a puzzle platformer, but more of an action puzzle platformer, Combo Postage. It had a big update just recently. Combo Postage is a sort of fast-paced, high-risk, high-reward sort of block erasing puzzle game that feels like a very high-speed combo of like Mario and Tetris is like a super reductive way to describe it. You are a tiny little guy. I think, actually don't know the gender of the tiny little person. I should check that. I think they've added some lore to the game in this update. You play this tiny little person running around a room that is a grid of cardboard boxes falling from the ceiling. And of course, you need to be not crushed by the boxes, and you need to tape up the boxes in columns and ship them out by jumping on them Mario butt stomp style. The controls are incredible. It's one of these games where a single round, it's very arcade style, so a single round is going to take you somewhere between 10 seconds and 3 or 4 minutes at the very longest if you're doing extremely well. So it's one of those games that like I constantly boot up to do like a very short little run. And like I've played so much of this game, guys. Like this is one of those games where like you ever have the maybe this is not a universal experience. Occasionally people send us games, and sometimes it's publishers, sometimes it's game developers who want to like say, hey, here's a game that you should check out. This was one of those games that was sent to me completely unprompted, and it sat in my inbox for a long time because I don't always pick up on things like that. And then when I did finally give it a chance, I felt like the world's biggest idiot because this game is incredible. This is a game that each individual time I play it takes perhaps 2 minutes. But I have spent easily 10 hours playing this game. I think based on like my like Steam clock or whatever. And I'm pretty sure maybe more. I don't know. But a lot of time has gone into this tiny little action puzzle thing. It's one of those things that I come back to again and again and again. I'm going to share my high score here, which has increased as soon as this game got its update. I installed the update and I started playing the same standard mode. It has a new mode that I haven't really dived into yet, so I'm not ready to share my scores there yet. But the original mode, I had been plateaued with a top score in the 70,000s. For a long time. I thought that was as high as I was ever going to get. And as soon as I installed the new update, it renewed me with vigor. And I got a new high score after a new high score. And now my new top score is 99,050. So I want people to come at me. You cannot beat my 99,050. It will not happen. This game is awesome. And I recommend it to absolutely everybody. It is available on itch.io and Steam. It's previously Windows only. It is now out on Linux, and I, ear to the ground, believe a Mac version may be incoming. But it's one of those things where, Apple has just continued to make it harder and harder and harder to release software as an independent person on Apple platforms. But its Windows version is fantastic. And that is what I recommend. So play Combo Postage. It rules. All right, Shane, what's making you happy this week?
Well, this is I'm going to keep this quick, but because this is of limited practical interest to the general population. But when I was a kid, when I was a kid, in my stocking when I was like 8 years old, I got a little toy called AstroJax, and I've kind of had them all my life. You can think of them as, if you think of like just the general category of like skill toys that would include like yo-yos and like, I don't know, juggling
Cup
balls
and string.
yeah, or something like kendama, where you have the little the cup and the ball that you try to get on the spike.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. I forgot what you call them.
Yeah.
Shane is the proper name for the ball and cup thing.
Yes. So in that kind of general genre, there's this product called AstroJax that is literally 3 beads on a string, and they're big beads about the size of a quarter or bigger. And in those days, they were sold like in like Target and stuff like that, and you kind of do a little juggly thing with them. Listeners, you can kind of imagine balls orbiting around each other on the end of a string. It's kind of yo-yo-esque.
What you can really imagine is if they lit up, they would be great at raves, but they don't light up.
So when I broke mine, what I did discover is they did make light up ones among many different kinds of them.
Now that you say
right.
that, yeah.
And those are the ones that are crazy expensive, almost certainly, precisely because they're almost certainly awesome at raves. I can't imagine how they would not be the most awesome thing to have at a rave. But the thing that I found out is like, okay, there's a zillion of these, and like I do, I start over researching when I want. So like my toy I've had since I was a kid that I love. It's like it's my 30-year-old man fidget spinner. I'm over researching it, and what I found is that the dude that originally created them has like a feud with the company that made them and has now basically discontinued them over the fact that like he went into this Swiss company and they were manufacturing them and for him, but then they started to kind of cut him out. And like the international law like is on his side, but he couldn't get the Swiss to respect it. You know, the Swiss are not famous for their respect for international law, and including patent law on AstroJax. And so he went down to like Belize or something, and he started a new company to make his own AstroJax. And the new ones are like handmade with crochet from sustainable materials and like cork and stuff. And they're just gorgeous. And like, this is the new upgraded version of the AstroJax that are now being produced.
Oh, and they're from the original creator. Yeah. These are the OG, the real deal AstroJax.
Well, the OG, you can still go get those on eBay, but I wanted to see what the new ones were like, and I love them. And I am back to doing my dumb juggling thing that I almost certainly will never do in front of anybody. But it is very
Patreon,
calming and relaxing.
New Patreon bonus content. Shane is going to record a video of himself juggling AstroJax.
If we get to 100
what's the
subscribers.
Threshold? If we get to whatever your threshold is, I will, and people ask for it because please don't make me put this out if nobody wants to see it. I will tell them.
Shane,
just
record a video. I'll make it private. Patrons only. Yep. Don't worry.
Okay.
This is the kind of content people want. And you know what? Frankly, they deserve. Okay, so
they deserve. Now that you've just talked about them, you can't not show people what AstroJax are. You have to record a video. Yep. We have to put it out on the Patreon for the folks.
Yep.
So.
So my recommendation for the week is the new Fair Trade AstroJax.
Wonderful.
Nice. Fair Trade AstroJax from Belize. That's awesome. Shane,
don't get that damn.
I am so sorry. Guatemala is where they are.
Damn dirty.
I just had to check the website. Yes, and curse the villainous Swiss for their disrespect for international law.
Oh my word. I'm surprised that AstroJax are like that. I thought that was literally just like a checkout aisle toy from Targets in the 1990s or something. Man, I would not have expected.
They were that and more. They're also a thing that you can get the light up ones on eBay for like $50.
I'm so happy
like
these exist. Like, this is a killer making us happy this week.
It is making me happy this week. I'm very glad to have found out that not only was I not screwed by having broken my toy from when I was like 8, that there's that they're thriving and they're doing the right thing, and I get to be happy about somehow they managed to make me happy about spending money on a beads on a string. So
Shane, confess, how much did your new AstroJax cost
I absolutely am not going to say that on this podcast. They're handmade.
Well, all right.
Handmade in the factory in Guatemala. Yes.
Yeah. All right, listeners, thank you so much for joining us on this podcast. You can find our show on the internet at www.theshortgame.net, where you'll find all the ways of contacting us, our contact form, links to our Twitter @_shortgame. Oh, look at him go. There he goes. Shane's. You listeners, you'll have to imagine the majesty of the AstroJax spinning away. You can find our show on all the major podcast platforms, which is a great place to go leave us a review. Please do that. And let's see, you can find us on Patreon, of course, patreon.com/theshortgame. Every single patron gets access to our Discord, which is where we talk about the show. We share what's coming up on the show. We discuss games as we're playing them. And also we just have spirited discussions about whatever. Let's see. Shane, you're distracting me from the podcast outro. Shane is spinning his AstroJax on camera. Shane,
this is definitely worth the cost of subscribing to our Patreon to see this.
I'm covering up the screen so that I don't get distracted. I have to finish the outro. Listen, listeners, if you want to see the AstroJax, you've got to go to Patreon and patreon.com/theshortgame, where you can support us at even just $1 a month and get access to our Discord. And listeners, if you subscribe at $5 a month, even just for a month, hey, that's up to you.
That sound was not me dropping them.
It was definitely Shane dropping
Shane, the weird thing here is that watching you do this
he very politely didn't laugh and just acted like nothing happened, and you outed yourself.
Shane, you'll be happy about this, but the real problem is watching you manipulate these AstroJax is making me age rapidly for some reason. So I'm gonna need you. I'm gonna need you to stop.
The AstroJax are great, Shane. Where was I? The Patreon.
Maybe making you old, but they're keeping me young.
It's a real picture of Dorian Gray situation on the podcast. Moving on.
Stickers. You can get stickers. If you subscribe for $5, I'll send you the stickers, I promise. And for the listeners who did that recently, apologies if there was a short delay in getting the stickers out. They are in the mail. If you are waiting on stickers, they're coming to you, I promise. Let's see. And that's it. Thank you for joining us on this episode of The Short Game. You can find me on the internet at Raygan K. That's Raygank. Laura, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Laura J. Nash.
Nate, where can people find you?
On Twitter at NateSTL.
And Shane, where can people find you?
On Twitter at 8BitShane.
And thank you so much for joining us on this episode of The Short Game.